God, and I just pray against any fear of man or anything that he feels he needs to share, but worried about people's opinions or thoughts about him. Thank you, that Lord, if you put it on his heart, Lord, I just pray he has a confidence to speak out, just as the prophets did. They didn't care too much if they're offending people, but they did it in the right way because you brought that message. So God, I just pray, speak to him this evening.
Amen. Lord, I pray that tonight wouldn't be about how Sam performs or how well he does. I pray that tonight would be about you, Lord, and that through you, Sam would be able to share a message with all of us today that would resonate and that would stay with us.
Amen.
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 Do you want to move? I'll leave it there.
Where do I need to sit?
Stay where you are. It's fine. It's got the whole
Sit where
world.
you're comfortable.
How does that make you feel? How does that make you feel? When you see that, when you're trying to load up a YouTube video or scrolling through Instagram, how does that make you feel? Go on, shout out. How does it make you feel?
I agree.
It annoys you, doesn't it? The Wi-Fi's lagging, you've not got any data, this is the only thing that's coming up. You're constantly refreshing to try and find whatever it is you're looking for. It's probably meaningless, it's probably useless, but that annoys us so much. But I want to talk about patience. In a world dominated by instant messaging, you can get movies through Netflix and music through Spotify whenever you want, as quickly as you want. How do we remain patient within that? Everything's speeding up. We can get what we want when we want it. We as young Christians especially, unfortunately, have become quite impatient with God. He's not our Amazon Prime. We can't select next day delivery straight after a prayer. You have to wait. It's all on his timescale. And I think Mike and Ben have challenged me with this one because patience is one of the hardest things to talk about, I find, because I can give you tips, I can explain to you what patience is, but when you're actually in that situation, it's not something you can do and it's a quick fix. That's the thing with patience, it's all about the waiting and the trust. The origins of the word patience come from the Greek terms for long and tempered. So it's to do with about having, you've got a long temper. It's got quite anti-violent backgrounds, but it used to be used to describe someone who could avenge themselves, but who chooses not to. Someone who goes against the norms of society to wait for that thing that they believe in. Normal life is filled with impatience, the opposite of what I'm meant to be talking about. When you're waiting for a bus to arrive or your music to download and it's taking minutes instead of seconds like you want it to. Many people in this room, I think, have done GCSEs already or are about to do them. And one of the hardest things is during that long summer, you get what, like 12 weeks off, and it feels amazing, but the entire time you're waiting for that envelope at the end of the summer that feels like it decides the rest of your life. Or maybe you're just waiting to get off to Reading. A life with God, however, is one of patience, not impatience. There are countless stories of when people in the Bible have waited years for God to fulfill the promises he made to them. Abraham, for example, is probably the most obvious example. He waited almost his entire adult life for God to fulfill the promise he made. He was 99 when God gifted him and his wife Sarah a child, a son. And this shows the greatest test of patience there's ever been, really. I mean, he's 99. God made this promise to him as a young man. He's waited forever, what feels like forever, for this promise to be fulfilled. I mean, I suspect he was still doing stuff that was quite practical in order to achieve getting a son, but he still he still trusted that God would fulfill. He was still trusting God that he would fulfill this promise when it was the right time. That leads me on to passive Christianity. You don't wake up in the morning and get God to decide everything for you. You don't hand over every decision in your life. You're not sort of like, God, if you're going to make me do something awesome today, force me to get out of bed. You just get up and have breakfast. You don't ask him to choose what cereal you're going to have, or whether you're going to have toast with chocolate spread or jam or whatever. You make those decisions because we know that God controls the bigger stuff. We know that it's not everything is in his. He doesn't direct every decision of ours. Patience comes from trust. If we can trust in what God is doing for us, we can wait patiently for him to act on those promises. There's a difference between nagging for something and asking lots. So nagging is when you're asking, waiting on your time scale, not waiting on God's. You don't ask constantly for something. We tend to nag our parents for things, don't we? When's dinner? I want it now. What's for dinner? When are we there yet? Stuff like that. We're waiting for it to happen on our time scale. Whereas waiting patiently is about waiting for when God's ready. So there's a verse in the Bible, which is Ephesians 6:18, which talks about, and pray in the Spirit on all occasions with all kinds of prayers and requests. With this in mind, be alert and always keep on praying for all the Lord's people. So this is the key example of the difference between nagging and constantly asking. The Bible tells us to keep praying for things because it matters. God likes to hear from us. He likes us talking to him. But it's not about it happening on our time scale. It's praying and waiting for God to do something, because God can see the bigger picture where we can't. You guys all know what a tapestry is, yeah? The woven pictures. If you look at a tapestry from the back, all you can see is the messy knots all tangled together. Whereas if you look at it from the front, you can see the beautiful picture that someone spent hours creating. And this is what God sees the front, we see the back. And that's why we can often get quite impatient with waiting for him, because we can't see the bigger picture and all the good things that are going on. We can only see the small things that are happening. It's quite difficult to comprehend that. I do completely get that. We want things to happen when we want them, not when God chooses for them to happen. Lots of people in this room will know the Parr brothers and their oldest brother Luke. He has severe epilepsy, and for years, my family, their family, our whole church was praying for him to be healed, be better. It hasn't happened, but we've seen it happen in a different way. For those of you that have met him, you'll find it impossible to not smile when you're around him. There's something about him that's so incredible that he warms your life when you meet him. But he's living a life that is far beyond what us as humans could have ever wished for. We only saw the end goal, which was him being healed, but what God has taken is moved that in a different direction to bless him and heal him in other ways. He's living his best life. But that wasn't done just by sitting back and saying, right, God, you do what you do, basically. They fought for what they knew was right for him to have, but trusts at the same time, trusting that God would open the right doors. So, for example, have you ever prayed for something and then got really annoyed when it doesn't happen almost straight away? In Luke 8, Jesus is on his way to heal Jairus' daughter. Jairus? I can never say that. Jairus' daughter, who's severely ill, and they've asked Jesus to come and walk to heal her. But on his way, a woman touches his cloak and gets healed of this disease she's had in her blood for years. I think she's been living with it for 12 years. when he gets there, Jairus and his family say, your daughter is dead, don't bother the teacher anymore. Effectively saying, it's too late, you might as well give up, she's gone. And as much as I can see why Jairus would say that, death, as humans we see death as the end. Jairus was expecting Jesus to walk straight down the road, heal his daughter, and go. And that was kind of it. He was expecting him to get straight there without any detours. So he was waiting impatiently for Jesus to arrive. Jesus, on the other hand, knew that getting to Jairus' house was important, but he acted to serve the bigger picture rather than just one single request. So in 1 Samuel, it then talks about, I don't actually know the exact verse of this, but it talks about a lack of patience can cause you to miss blessings. And this is exactly what Jairus had done. He saw Jesus was meant to be coming to heal his daughter, whereas Jesus managed to heal 2 people in that story. So horse blinkers, which is the things that horses wear to cover their eyes so they can't see out, usually during parades, sometimes during races, to keep them focused on the very end destination. And that's how a lot of people live their lives, particularly their spiritual lives, where it's always focusing on the next thing. You're not watching out the sides to see the blessings that God is doing in the rest of our lives. We're always focusing on what's coming next, when's the next big time for that. So how many people here have been to a concert or a festival or seen some form of live music? Right? You haven't, Mike?
No.
You have? Okay. When you're there, particularly nowadays, maybe not when Mike was going, people have their phones out all the time.
What's that?
Yeah. For example, my parents were at Snow Patrol last night. Yeah.
Great man.
And Mum took loads of photos of people just holding their phones out, recording it. There you go. And so we watched the entire concert or the entire show or whatever through our screens. Even if we're actually there, you're watching it through your screen, thinking about how good it's going to look when you post it later or how much your friends are going to enjoy it. Instead of just living in the moment, you're impatiently waiting for what you're going to then do with that photo. You might well have not gone and just watched it through someone else's phone, because that's how much you're experiencing it just through the screen. We're sometimes like that with our spiritual lives. We're watching it all focusing on when the next thing is. We're not living right in the moment. So obviously there's going to be peaks and troughs. There's going to be better times in our spiritual lives and worse times. But sometimes we put too much focus and emphasis on this like one event. For a lot of people, that's Soul Survivor. So I'm not trying to dampen Soul Survivor. It is amazing. But what we do sometimes is only focus on that, and we treat that with some sort of more respect than we give every other day. We devote that time to God where we should just be devoting that time everywhere in our lives. God doesn't work on certain days. He works all the time. We can choose to devote every day to God, every day living our lives like Jesus, talking to God all the time. But quite often, we're just impatiently with those horse blinkers on, just looking at when the next thing is, only focusing on when our next big hit, effectively, of God is. Instead of having those horse blinkers over our eyes, we need to fully open our eyes and hearts to God in every aspect and in every part of our life. This is usually the bit where I give you tips on how to be more patient, how to achieve patience, but that's actually almost impossible. There isn't really a 5-point program you can just follow and wham, you're patient. It's one of those things that comes following trust, and then with practice and experience, it is really difficult to you can't just click your fingers and be more patient. You can't do something specific. You've just got to trust God. it is impossible to have greater patience if we can't trust that God is in charge of our overall plan. Ultimately, we need to give more space and more time to God in our lives. So don't only focus on the next time he's going to talk to you, the next time you're going to experience life with him. Find the time in your everyday life to experience that with him. Sundays aren't some special time that God is just going to, he works on Sundays, he only works then, and then it's done. The rest of the week, you've got to go off just that hit from Sunday. You can pray whenever you want, you can talk to God whenever you want. So next time your train is late, your bus is late, you're waiting for that YouTube video to load, don't stress about what you could be doing instead of that. Don't stress about why it isn't happening right now. Be patient and take that time to talk to God. Don't be impatient for waiting for the chance to talk to him. Act on it, because that's what he wants. Thank you.
The greatest sign of appreciation I've ever given. Great. So, can the worship band please come back up? And can we give Sam another round of applause?
Would you like to stand? So, obviously I've asked you to stand.